Should your taxpayer dollars be used to fund the abortion industry? Specifically Planned Parenthood, which has already raked in some $3 billion from public funding over the last 5 years. That's one of the questions coming out of a high-stakes Supreme Court hearing happening this week. Plus, 3 brave female athletes take on the Virginia government to protect girls' safety and privacy in sports. From the Family Foundation, I'm your host, Candi Cushman, with our president, Victoria Cobb. Well, welcome everyone. Glad to have you with us for Speak Up Virginia. And before we launch in here, I just want to remind everyone to share our Speak Up Virginia playlist on YouTube. And also, if you're listening on audio platforms like Apple and Spotify, be sure and give us that 5-star review because it really does help get the word out to more people. And, you know, we need more people understanding what's going on in the battle to protect families, life, and freedom in our state. So on that note, let's get right into it. I'll just mention that today we are going live on a very special, one of the best days of the year on our calendar, the Virginia March for Life on April 2nd. That's when this is going live. So
we are so excited about this day. So hopefully you're listening. You've downloaded this right away in the morning, and you're literally on your way into the march listening to this episode. So we are prayerful that this will be a great event.
Yeah, that is the hope, that you're listening as you march or heading into March. And what I want to just mention is that later on in this episode, we're going to talk about why this year's march is especially key with this abortion amendment battle and other things that are going on at the state capitol on April 2nd that will affect all of you. We'll get into that in a moment. But first, Victoria, I did just want to really pick your brain on a very exciting development in the world of girls' sports. You know, we put a press release out about this a few days ago, and I don't think a lot of people know about it. But really, it just boils down to there are 3 courageous female athletes here in Virginia that are challenging our government, the Virginia government, to really step it up when it comes to protecting girls' privacy and their safety in this whole sports world. Tell us what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, we did not get the Save Girls Sports bill passed, so we're not going to see a law in our code. And so these swimmers aren't going to wait around. They're basically saying, look, we believe there's already a government entity with the authority to do this. So we'll get into that. Let me just tell you who they are. Yeah. Folks probably remember some of these swimmers. We've talked about them before. They've been courageous. But let me just remind folks who they are. First, we have Reka Georg, who is a former Virginia Tech swimmer, and she was the one you might remember because I know this is a part of Riley Gaines' story with Leah Thomas and, you know, all these folks. But, you know, this swimmer had to share a locker room with Leah Thomas, who was the male swimmer who decided to go swim in women's sports. And so,
yeah, people, just for frame of reference, a lot of you might remember seeing that famous photo of when he got the trophy. And Riley Gaines is just standing there with this look of shock
She
on
likes
her
to
face.
make a big deal about they tied, and there was only one trophy. It's like, give this guy the trophy.
That's that same incident. So at that time, she was being forced to share a locker with this man.
Yes.
Okay.
And then also we have Lily Mullins, who is the captain of the Roanoke College women's swim team, and also her teammate, Carter Satterfield. And so these ladies have said, look, there's a different way to do this because we have something called the Board of Health. And the Board of Health should be governing health standards in the Commonwealth. And so these swimmers have petitioned the Board of Health to step in and actually regulate the health and safety of women in the arena of sports and facilities.
Now, this was personal for the Roanoke swim team as well. Kind of remind us why this is, you know, why they're motivated right now.
Yeah, these swimmers first spoke out in 2023 when a man who had previously competed on the men's team actually switched to their women's team in Roanoke College. So they literally all of a sudden found themselves with a male on their team, and they were supposed to share all these private changing spaces with this male.
Okay. So these girls they know what this is like up close and personal. So they are motivated to step up on behalf of other women across the state. So Victoria, help us understand this process. Yeah. What happens and how can people get involved?
Yeah, it's interesting. Anyone can actually petition the Board of Health to step in and do some things that are within their scope. And so that's what they've done. They've basically put forward a formal petition urging the Virginia Board of Health to establish new regulations. So, you know, you think of there's the sort of the Constitution, then there's the code, and then there's sort of the regulations that govern the details of things.
Okay, so we don't have to wait for state law. It's like an agency that has a power.
Exactly. And also, you know, this is so consistent with what the federal government government is trying to, you see Trump's EOs and telling, everybody that you've got to actually restrict sports to women's sports
like
to
a
women.
regulations.
Yeah, so this is very much in line with the general mood of the country and where we're going. We do finally have the NCAA and the Virginia Sports League are starting to get along on board, and so this is just saying like, look, we're heading this direction, but we really deserve some regulations around this to be implemented.
I think that NCAA is a good point because there's already a precedent for these organizations taking action.
Yeah.
So there's no reason why they can't move ahead, right?
Exactly. So let me just kind of tell folks what happens from here, right? So you submit the petition, and it'll be published in the Virginia Register of Regulations, which is updated every 14 days. So people will see that soon. There was a press release, so it's available for folks that want to read that. But basically, they're just asking, saying, look, we need you to do something. And then that kicks off, once it gets officially put in, that kicks off a 21-day period where actually the public can bring support. So this is an opportunity for people to jump in and actually register comments. They can put some comments out there. And then you have a comment period that concludes, and then the Virginia Board of Health has 90 days to decide if they're going to take action. So they're not required, just because somebody says, hey, I think you should do this, they aren't required to act on it. So that's going to be an important thing there.
So it sounds like there's going to be two opportunities for people to come and stand behind these girls. And the first is the public comment section. So please stay tuned on our email alert and this podcast, because we will let you know when it is time to flood that thing with comments. We'll let you know where to go. And then after that, then the Board of Health can make its mind up. So we'll probably want to show up at Board of Health meetings, right? Like have people
we have a long history of being very involved with our Board of Health. Of course, they're involved on abortion standards and all the other things that we used to have. And so if folks were part of that before, we would go to the meetings. We gotta rally again. And so we'll see. We're hoping this board is largely appointed by our current governor. So that is a good thing, because Governor Youngkin has said we think only girls should play in girls' sports. So hopefully he has put on the Board of Health people who align with his philosophy that then should hopefully react and say, okay, yeah, this makes sense. Let's go do this.
This could be exciting. We could be setting a precedent for other states, right? Have there been many other states doing this?
That's a great question. Every state structures differently, and so how you actually regulate sports is different. We have an unusual system with our Virginia Sports League in and of itself, and then sort of which entities and what do they call them. But I think everyone across the country that isn't in Virginia should be looking at their own state government and going, okay, there's lots of avenues. It's not just the law. It's also, is there a governmental authority that already has some authority and scope here? Can they do anything?
And how is our legal team and our policy team really helping out in this?
Well, I think it was important to figure out, is there the legal authority? So our law center definitely has looked at it and said, we do believe that there is the ability to do this. Because, you do have to, you can't ask somebody to do something that they really aren't instructed by our government to do.
So we're armed legally if they try to say they aren't in a position to do it.
Correct.
We're ready.
Yes.
All right. I'm very excited about this. So stay tuned. We'll let you know when to add your voice. Well, let's get into these pro-life issues, because as I said, the Virginia March for Life is happening at the time this is first coming out. And there's a lot of movement on this issue nationwide. It is really on the front lines right now in the battle to defend what our founding fathers regarded as sacred, and that started with human life. And so, Victoria, tell us what's going on nationally, where this battle is at right now, because I know there's been a lot in the headlines.
Well, literally today, the day that you're hearing this, is also the day there's a lot of activity at the U.S. Supreme Court. And that's because there's a case, and it's basically a situation where we have a state, South Carolina, who has said, look, our state philosophy is we're not about abortion. They have restricted abortion dramatically in South Carolina. And so they're sitting here saying, why would we then allow Planned Parenthood to be the recipient of our tax dollars, which they go in through programs like Medicaid and others, where you literally have federal money flows through the state to certain providers. And so they have said, we want to disqualify Planned Parenthood as a recipient. And of course, that prompted litigation. And so now we're all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court with this case. And essentially, does a state have the right to disqualify Planned Parenthood as a legitimate provider? And you would think when the philosophies don't align, it would seem fair to think that doesn't make them a qualified provider.
I think this is so maddening that they even have to defend the action that the governor in the state wants to take, because, as you have said many times, abortion is not healthcare. But I see in these media reports about this that Planned Parenthood is out there claiming, or at least the reporters are saying based on Planned Parenthood reports, that less than 5% of the services Planned Parenthood offers are abortions. That's what I'm seeing in the media reports. I want to hear your response to that.
Oh, yeah. They make it seem like abortion is not the predominant thing that they do. But that's, first of all, the reports don't show that. The reports show, generally, you can look at a general trend of Planned Parenthood. And what you see is legitimate services other than abortion keep going down. And abortion is skyrocketing with Planned Parenthood. Yeah. So the actual numbers that we saw were something like in their most recent annual report, Planned Parenthood performed 400,000 abortions. So that's between 2021, October, and September 30th. So like 1 year to 2022. That's kind of, data always trails a little bit from the year that you're in.
So let's just sit on that for a minute. 400,000 abortions a year that they are doing.
While claiming they're basically some other kind of healthcare provider, which is insane. And more than that, I think when you actually realize that they're fighting for these Medicaid dollars. They're saying we want to be a part to do these other services. They don't have to do abortion, and they would be a qualified provider. It's only one thing that they do, and it's theoretically they say it's a very small percentage of what they do that is blocking South Carolina's willingness to give them this fund. So I think it's interesting that at any point Planned Parenthood could say, okay, we're primarily something else.
Yeah.
And they could get all these dollars, but they aren't. They are about abortion, and everybody knows that they're doing abortions.
Well, I think a key principle in this case is whether a state can say our taxpayers cannot be forced to subsidize. We can make this decision that we're not going to subsidize at taxpayer expense an abortion industry. And so, Victoria, what kind of precedent could this maybe set? I mean, will it come down to Virginia if there is a good ruling in this case?
I mean, there's a lot of states that would like to block Planned Parenthood dollars from getting coming from the federal government through their state. So there's a lot of states that are very interested in this. I would love Virginia to be a state that wanted to block Medicaid funding going to Planned Parenthood. We have worked on that in the past. It was a little easier under an aligned legislature and governor, right? So we worked really hard to defund Planned Parenthood during, there was a couple years that we had sort of everybody was theoretically pro-life, and you could really push on this. It's always been a battle. Because, again, there's this argument that they do legitimate things as well. And we said the same thing. Okay, if you care more about your legitimate things and not your abortion, stop abortion. And it's, carry on. But no, we know what they care about. Everybody knows what they care about.
Well, speaking of what they do, we know that they've escalated the whole gender identity sphere.
Well, that's the whole other thing is even if they didn't do abortion, now we got to deal with gender change issues in Planned Parenthood. So obviously we dislike a lot of things that they do.
So that leads me right into what's going on with the Trump administration and this freeze on HHS spending, because I think this is really fascinating because Planned Parenthood is claiming that they're this legitimate healthcare organization. But they have come under attention, and I think probably with a lot of this gender identity and that they've tried to get in on all of this push toward, I guess, young people, being on this escalation toward changing their gender identity. And so the Trump administration has put a freeze trying to look at where are there inappropriate spending on this indoctrination stuff. And that includes DEI and the gender identity radicalism. And because of that, they're looking at the HHS spending, Department of Health and Human Services. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, we saw this announcement coming out of the Trump administration that basically they're going to freeze. So they haven't said it'll never happen, but they basically said we're going to stop all funding that's going in these grants through HHS, basically for family planning services type things. Typically it goes to contraceptive efforts and all, just a whole slew of things. And they're stopping. They're not singling out Planned Parenthood. They're not the only recipient of these grants, but they're it looks like part. It looks like $20 million for sure is Planned Parenthood. My guess is that's the low end. And so they're saying, look, until we figure out if you are sort of in opposition or doing the opposite of our philosophy around DEI, which is that we don't want to continue to promote these LGBT things and the DEI. So basically, they're saying until we figure out what's going on here and where the grants are actually going and what the services are provided that actually are funded through these grants, we're going to put it on hold. And we know. I mean, just here in Virginia, Planned Parenthood was doing a private event that was like this, Rise Up Women's Summit thing for young girls, and it was all about women, right? But they don't even know what a woman is. They're doing gender transition. So of course there's going to be a problem. It's going to defy what the president has said. So So I don't see how they continue to do. But my guess is those are the kind of programs that are probably funded with these grants. I can't swear that. I haven't looked at the dollar stream. But it's ridiculous.
Is this the same event where they have the earrings?
I can't remember.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe. But it's just literally like
we won't talk about what those earrings were shaped like if we're talking about the same thing.
The idea that Planned Parenthood can do anything that claims to be about women when they don't even define women correctly, I think tells us everything we need to know about where these grants are probably going.
All right. Well, I just want to feature this. I think it's like a 50-second video that Alliance Defending Freedom put out because they're the ones involved in this case that's at the Supreme Court right now. And I thought it was a pretty good video talking about what Planned Parenthood is really about and the extremism that is there and, what's behind this $3 billion that they've been getting. So let's just watch that for a few seconds.
Planned Parenthood claims to be a healthcare provider, but a recent New York Times report exposed the abortion giant for what it really is. Planned Parenthood raked in more than $3 billion of public funding in the last 5 years. But the group pours millions of dollars into pro-abortion activism every year, and women are paying the price. One woman was assured her abortion was complete, only to give birth weeks later to a baby who quickly died. Another had an IUD mistakenly implanted while 4 months pregnant, and her baby was later stillborn. And a third woman said she experienced nerve damage after a botched procedure. Now the U.S. Supreme Court will decide whether states can choose health, not harm. Planned Parenthood doesn't deserve your tax dollars. And women deserve better than Planned Parenthood.
Well, I think this video is really helpful for a lot of people who maybe don't know all the details. We can't forget Planned Parenthood was on selling baby body parts. Their history, they've been caught they've been caught in undercover videos with like sex trafficking, like sort of not basically trying to ask the right kinds of questions to get. So like these organizations have so much history that should not be getting federal dollars. And I appreciate all the national groups did a big day up on the Hill bringing their constituents to talk to Congress because we really do ultimately need this done both with the president freezing grants, but also an actual effort in the law, in the budget.
And Trump said he might look into, there's a reporter that asked him a question about the baby part scandal, and he said, we're looking into that.
Yeah, I think we at least have a government that actually takes this stuff seriously now and doesn't give abortion industry the right to do whatever and say whatever because they do these preposterous things. You mentioned that, we were talking about the Rise Up event, but you mentioned these crazy earrings with the uterus is
uterus earrings, I think.
Young girls don't need that. I promise. They don't need that. And this is the kind of stuff that this tax dollars are funding. And even when they argue tax dollars aren't directly going for the abortion, they're keeping the lights on, doors open, and running programs like this. This is not necessary, not helpful, and I think absolutely opposite of the philosophy of where we're headed as a nation.
Yeah, well said. All right. Well, as we mentioned, we were going to talk a little bit about this year's March for Life, and I love that Winsome Sears, Lieutenant Governor Winsome Sears, is the keynote speaker, which I am thrilled about. But help us understand, I know we've talked about it a lot, but what's at stake? Why was it so important that so many people came out for the march this year? And also maybe say a little bit about what's happening with Veto Day.
Yeah, we have this constitutional amendment on the table where they are trying to put unfettered right to abortion with no parameters, no safety, no guardrails, just abortion with no laws that touch it, basically. And they're trying to put that into our Constitution. And so we felt like this year, which this is a 2-year process, but we felt like the start of this, when they passed it for the first time this year, we needed to have a strong counter presence to be involved with that. And the Governor Youngkin had to veto the FACE Act. So Veto Day is the day where they come in and deal with vetoes. They thankfully do not have 2/3 to override the governor really on anything. So we're very grateful because he said, look, having a law that doesn't let people pray outside an abortion facility is un-American, unconstitutional. Yeah. It's unconstitutional. It's absurd. So we've had some things that are absolutely at stake that come up. And so I'm just glad we have folks that are willing to take their day and really be heard. Yeah.
And next week, we're going to update you on some other actions that came out of Veto Day, whether the representatives upheld or tried to reject certain amendments and vetoes. We'll give you all the latest on that next week's podcast. And I'm hoping we'll also maybe have some video footage soon of the Virginia March for Life from, today, and we'll be able to share that as soon as possible. But just to kind of celebrate what's happening, I did want to feature your 3-minute speech from last year because it was so powerful. And Victoria talked about the extremism that's trying to be pushed on our state right now and just trying to celebrate a death culture and how we need to speak up against that. And I think it's even more relevant now. So I'm just going to play just a couple of minutes of that. Let's all enjoy that. Let's hear from Victoria.
Good morning, pro-lifers. We are blessed with another fantastic day for the 6th annual march. Thank you to each one of you that woke up this morning and decided the most important thing you could do wasn't for you, but was actually for you to be a part of helping vulnerable women and children who are caught in the deception of abortion. I know you're aware that we have over at that General Assembly abortion extremists that hold the majorities in our House and Senate. These abortion extremists allow legal abortion up until the moment of birth in Virginia. They allow our tax dollars to prop up the abortion industry. These extremists are trying to make Virginia the destination where women come from other states to have their abortions. These extremists are trying to turn Virginia into the exporter of chemical abortion around our nation. And now these extremists want to put unrestricted abortion extremism into our own Constitution. But we can stop the extremism. You see, we carry the message of hope. We tell women the truth, that they can in fact be moms and still have their career and go to school. We offer up the pro-life community to give them support that they need when something seems impossible. We confront the abortion industry who prey on women for profit. You see, abortion will only ever truly end in Virginia when women stop believing the lie that a child is, rather than being an unending blessing and joy, will be some end to their path of achievement. Abortion ends when women believe that a child entering the world, even as the result of heartbreaking circumstances, is the beautiful phoenix rising from the ashes, not a burden. Abortion ends when the tough in utero diagnosis is no longer treated like a plague that needs to be taken out, but instead is the opportunity to help our society learn how to love those who are different from ourselves. Abortion ends when a young person, a pregnant girl, is unprepared to parent, but she sees her situation as the wonderful option for adoption that allows her unborn child to continue to live in someone else's wonderful family. We, the pro-life movement, have work to do to reorient our society in having hope in the future, to loving all people and supporting all pregnancies. In the meantime, we engage in the political sphere to stop more women from being harmed with false information. Thank you so much for being here today. We are blessed, and we're looking forward to marching with you.
Well, Victoria, I love how you just painted a bigger picture of what the pro-life movement is all about and how we really need to be messaging to society this idea that life represents hope. Babies represent hope, not a burden, just this whole mindset.
We've got a long way to go as a nation where we really value children. And I think anything we can do, we should be talking to our friends and neighbors about this, just about the wonderful blessing that it is to have children. And that when a woman finds herself in an unplanned moment where she didn't expect to be pregnant, there is so much support we can wrap around her. And that she will, in the end, when we can put that kind of support around her, I mean, what a blessing that child will be. There's so many stories of women who thought about abortion and backtracked. And I mean, they can't even imagine their life without their child.
Well, I think that's a great place to wrap up. Thank you, Victoria. Remember, we are stronger when we speak together. Don't forget to share our Speak Up Virginia podcast with friends so you can inspire others, and we will see you next time.